Hello, I am Mariela Carabajal.
I am Florencia Segovia.
I am Mariana Rivero.
And I am Guevara, and we are going to talk about Industrial Revolution.
Okay, nowadays we live in a world of constant changes. These changes are a result of a process that took place between 1700 and 1850, and it was called Industrial Revolution. But what was Industrial Revolution? Certainly, it was a process of changes in farming, transport, industry, and social life. I'm going to start talking about agriculture. In the past, people who lived in the country used their land to take food from it in order to feed themselves. However, for one reason, the population grew and the farmers saw the need of improving their farming methods, since what they were doing till that moment would not be enough. Here we have two maps. In the first map, we can see how was the farming before what was called the enclosure. All the fields were divided in a multitude of strips. But then came the enclosure movement, which consisted of dividing the land into fields of a reasonable size so that each form would be one compact piece. As we can see here, they were most close to the farm. This process of enclosure was welcomed by richer farmers who saw the benefits it could give for them. However, poor villagers were who suffered the most, because as they didn't have common field to graze their animals, they were obliged to sell them. Besides, many poor farmers lost their land and had to work as laborers for one of the big farmers. Thanks to the enclosure, there were improvements in farming. This was called Agricultural Revolution. Each farmer was independent to do as he liked. Before enclosure, farmers had to leave a separate area resting called fallow, so that they could keep their land fertile. Later on, farmers discovered that as long as they changed their crops, the land didn't need a rest. Giving up fallow meant that farmers were growing crops on all their lands. Here we can see a circle that shows that more crops they would come to feed more animals, and they will have more manure, and that will give them more money. Another improvement was the machinery. In the early 18th century, a farmer invented a seed drill. It helped a lot because it sowed the seed of the right depth and reduced the amount of seed wasted. Another important machine was the thresher. It helped to thresh out the wheat faster than before, and this didn't help laborers since they were unemployed for the worst months of the year. Talking about people of the villages, before agricultural revolution, the society was like a ladder. With different social class, different steps. The first step are the aristocrats, who were men who owned large estates. In the second step are the gentry or squires that might own several estates or a little land, but they mustn't work. In the third state we have the yeomen. They earned almost the same as the gentry, but they couldn't rank with them since they had to work. Then we have the large farmers who were men who had 40 hectares or more. They didn't enjoy the same status of yeomen because they didn't own their land. Instead of it, they had to rent it. Then we have the small farmers who were people who didn't employ laborers. They worked their farms with the help of their families. Then we have the cottagers who owned a few beasts and rented a small amount of land. Almost at the end, we have the laborers who might have a pig or even a cow. And the last one were the squatters. They lived in hovels out of the common. They worked as laborers. After the agricultural revolution, there were only three distinct groups. We have aristocrats and squires, large farmers and laborers. The aristocrats and squires were enclosed their land, and despite having to spend more money, they doubled their rents and became richer. The larger farmers had to pay higher rents, but they were able to use new methods and double their incomes. And the last one were the laborers, who were the old small farmers. Now that I have told you the different steps of the ladder, we will do an activity. I will give you some questions and you have to choose. It's a multiple choice. For example, the first question says, how do we call the land which was separated for resting? I will ask for one volunteer, please, to here we have.
Can I?
Please.
Okay.
Mariana?
Okay, do I have to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. The question says, how do we call the land which was separated for resting? A grass, big fallow, or 3 or 6 wheat?
What do you think?
Big fallow.
Big. Good.
Okay. I will make a grass.
Okay, thank you very much. Here we have another one, please. Mara,
Yes.
please read it.
Okay. The most important people in the 19th century were the yeomen, the aristocrats, and the gentry. I think the aristocrats.
Very good, Mara. Excellent. Well, and I will read the last one and you will tell me. One of the social class that disappeared after agricultural revolution were aristocrats, laborers, or you? What do you think?
Aristocrats.
No,
No.
yeomen. I think it's yeomen.
Very good, Mara. Score for Mara.
Yay!
Okay, that was agriculture. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I'm going to deal with transport in the 18th century. So, during this century, the people who used the roads were mainly villagers going to and from the fields. Since they used the roads, they were responsible of maintaining them, and all the roads had to be fixed by them. So it was a law that everyone should work on the road for 6 days in a year, and villagers needed farm tracks, so that is why they used the roads. The bigger roads were public rights of way that anyone could use, but they were rough and uneven to ride, and a journey that today would take 2 or 3 hours could last several days. So the best way to travel was horseback. As the town grew a lot, the trade also grew, and while food had to be brought in and from the countryside, they used the roads, and there were droves of animals and coaches all using these roads. When the villager looked after them, they threw stones into the worst of the potholes. This was not good enough, so they employed skilled engineers, for example, Thomas Telford and John Macdam. Telford's road, which is very famous and it was very expensive at that time, and then the Macadam's road, which was cheaper, but it wore out more quickly. So now I'm going to deal with canals, and the best way to transport heavy goods like coal, bricks, was by canals or water. Britain has a large number of rivers quite suitable for barges, who were like boats, but to transport things. And the problem with rivers to transport was that they do not always flow where they are needed. So in order to overcome this, men had to make canals. The most famous was the Bridgewater Canal, and it was named after its owner, who was the Duke, Bridgewater Duke, near Manchester. He lived more or less 11 kilometers far, and he had two problems in his coal mines. There was a lot of water in his mines, and it was too expensive to transport his coal by pack horse, and so he decided to build a canal which would carry both water and food. Now I'm going to deal with shipping, and Britain had two kinds of seaport trade. One was the coastal trade, and the other was overseas trade. And the coastal trade was far more important because the inland transport was so bad. So this coastal trade was quicker, easier and cheaper to send goods by sea and by road or rivers or canals. Not only coal, but goods of all kinds, but they also could carry passengers, although they prefer to travel by road. Along with the risk of shipwreck and seasickness, no one could tell how long a sailing ship would take, and because it also depended on the wind, that they didn't know how it would take and how much time the trip would take. So no one could tell how long a sailing ship would take, and until the very end of the 19th century, most of the Britain's overseas trade was carried by sailing ships. And we have railways, which were built many years ago, much time ago, and the first railways were built in the 16th century, and the rails were simply made of wood, so they had wooden planks. And then during the 18th century, iron became much cheaper, so it was possible to have all iron rails, because they were more advanced in the industry of iron, so they could build these iron rails. There were two kinds, plateway and edge-fail. The first type were plates, which were especially popular in the south of England, and they could take wagons with ordinary wheels that would also run on road. So these wheels can be used also on road, However, it has some disadvantages. For example, dirt collected in the angles, so workmen were kept busy cleaning them in order to get rid of all the dirt. The other kind was the edge air rail, and the wagon wheels could not be on a road. They just used them on the edge rails, and they were more efficient than the plate. In the end, it was these kind of rails were used everywhere. And the first really modern railway was the Liverpool and Manchester, which was opened in the 1830, and it used locomotives in its entire length. Then a man called Stephenson was the engineer, and he, with his son, built the rocket locomotive. People were surprised by its amazing speed because they could travel faster and, well, more comfortable also. So railways were much better than coaches, for example, for passengers, and they were much better than canals for goods. And with the invention of the, not invention, but with the improvement of these railways, then the canals started to lose importance and were not longer used, as well as the roads for long distance journeys and for transporting things. Okay, so now we're going to do an activity in which we have different sentences related to transport and related to these four types of transport, which are roads, canals, shipping, and railways that we have been talking about. And my students will help me to complete each sentence with the correct word. Yes? So, we're going to start. First, I'm going to read it, and then you complete. Yes? So, number one says, in the 18th century, the people who used roads were mainly going to and from the fields. So, any volunteer to complete number one?
Okay, let me check. I think it's villagers.
Excellent. Very good. Excellent, Mariana. So, now we're going to do number two, but I'm not going to read it. You have to come to the front, complete it, and then you read it. Mariela, please.
Okay. The best way to transport heavy goods like were canals. And I think it is railways.
No, I don't think
No?
so, because it says heavy goods. So what's
Bone
heavy
and
goods?
bricks here.
Excellent. Very good, Mariana. And number three.
Okay.
Okay, Mariana again.
Okay.
Would you like to read it
Okay, the was more important because it was quicker, easier, and cheaper to send goods, sea than by river, canals, or road. Let me check.
That was more important because it was quicker. What we were talking about? Which one was quicker?
I think it's railways.
Excellent. Very good, Mariana. Perfect. And number four. Okay, Maria. Okay. Can you read it first?
The first type of iron rail were, which were popular in, let's see.
We have two types of iron rails.
We have the plates
Excellent. Very good.
and the south of England.
They were popular in the south.
In the south of England.
Okay. Perfect. Very good. And I'm going to do the last one. Yes. And it says, coastal trade were much better than coaches for passengers and much better than canals for goods. So, this is the end, and this is all about transport.
Okay, now we're going to deal with the following topics, which are coal mining, the domestic system in the woolen industry, the cotton industry and the growth of the factory system, iron and power. We're going to start with coal mining. You know, this is one of Britain's oldest industry. At first, people dug coal only where it was close to the surface. If they found an outcrop, they made a hole into the ground, following the line into the ground. These workings are called drift mines. And by the 16th century, more coal was needed because London was growing into a big city and burned a lot of fuel. To win this extra coal, miners had to sink shafts, yes, to reach the deeper seams, but they found a problem. Which was the problem? It was water. You know, water in the ground gets into any mine and it will fill it quite rapidly, quite quickly, unless there is a pump to keep it dry. After this, in 1712, Thomas Newcomen made his first steam engine. Let me show you the picture so you can see the name. You know, it's Thomas Newcomen. Okay. But as well as water, the miners had another problem. You know, gas methane, because when it has contact with a flame, what happens? It explodes. And unfortunately, many miners lost their lives at that time because they used candles to light their way. In the old mines, whole families had to work together. You know, the father dug the coal and his wife and children dragged it to the surface. And another important thing is that coal was important for Britain because there were many large towns and they all needed coal for heating and cooking, and industries also needed fuel, and any factory that had a steam engine burned a great deal. Now let's move on to the next topic, the domestic system in the woolen industry. In the 18th century, most goods were made by craftsmen using simple tools, and working was done in their homes. The men in charge of it were called clothiers, and they were merchants who had more to do with selling the cloth than with making it. In those days, many women were happy to spin, and most of them were wives of farm laborers. And as the men were badly paid, the families needed the money the women earned. But not all the women were very skillful. And as regards the weavers, when they had finished, the merchant took the cloth into his own little mill where it was finished. And we call this way of making goods the domestic system because it was done at home. And it suited the workers who stayed at home, and it was, though, very inefficient, and it made it their goods or their production expensive. Now let's move on to the following topic, that is the cotton industry and the growth of the factory system. You know, in the early 18th century, the cotton industry was not important in Britain. In 1850, cotton was more important than wool. One reason for this was that the cotton manufacturers learned to make their goods in factories. At first, cotton cloth was made by workers in their own homes using spinning wheels and hand looms. Okay, The industry was organized on the domestic system just like wool. In 1733, a man called John Kay invented a flying shuttle. Let me show you a picture. You know, this was the gadget invented or created by John Kay. I hope you were able to see it. And it was a simple gadget which could be fitted to any hand loom, but it allowed a weaver to work twice as quickly as before. And as a consequence, there was much work to do and not enough women. So, a man called James Hargreaves invented the spinning machine, and it was called Jenny after his wife. Let me see if I can find Jenny. Here it is. Here it is, James Jenny. Okay, this was the machine he invented. And all these inventions, what all these inventions did was to allow the domestic workers to make clothes more quickly. Okay. In 1779, Samuel Crompton invented another spinning machine, and it could spin very fine thread. Let me see. Okay, Samuel, here it is. So you can see also the name. You know, Samuel Crompton, and his spinning machine. Okay. Well, now the English manufacturers could make delicate muslins, which until that moment had been imported from India. Moreover, it was harder to make an automatic loom, and Richard Roberts made it. Here, I've got pictures for everything, but not everything. But let me show. So, Richard Roberts, and this is a power loom. Okay. So now manufacturers in other industries such as wool, lace, and even button making began to build factories, and by the end of the 19th century the domestic system was no more used. Okay, now let's see what's next. Okay, we've got iron. Okay, so most of the works were small and run by an iron master, his sons, and a workman or two. So how is iron made? You need three things. You need iron ore, oak forests, and water power. In 1706, a Quaker iron master hired a blast furnace. Let me show you a picture of the blast furnace. This is the picture. But the problem was that with this blast furnace, that a charcoal fire wasn't hot enough to melt the iron. But then charcoal was replaced by coke. Coke is not what you drink. Yes, it's a mineral.
Okay.
Okay. This was very important because, well, the discovery of coke smelting was important because by using it, the demand was able to be met. And as to round up with iron, we can say that steel is the best form of iron. Why? Because it is tougher and harder. Okay. The last topic we have is power. Okay. Well, as regards power, the oldest kind of power, is muscle power, and the power of animals. But there is a limit to this two powers. So wind and water mills were used. Windmills appeared for grinding, grinding corn, but the wind gave problems because what happens with winds? It blows in different directions. And on the other hand, water mills were much older, and the first ones were very simple. But then again appears Mr. Newcomen, and he made a pumping engine, but it burned so much fuel that the only one who could afford one was a coal owner only. And after that it was improved, and this new version were driven by a steam, and there was no danger of explosion. Okay, we're done with all the topics, so now we're going to do an activity. I hope you have paid attention.
Always.
Okay, that's excellent. Let me move these posters. Okay, we're going to do a true or false, okay? Do you know how to do it?
Yeah.
You're very intelligent. Okay. Of course, I will need some volunteers. No? What?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. This is a piece of cake, if you have paid attention, we do it just like this. And here you've got some clues, so you know how many of them are true or false. Who would like to start? Okay, Myra, come to the front, pick up a sentence, and then you pick your poster. Read it, please.
Yes. The domestic system was first used after the Industrial Revolution.
And what do you think, Mara?
No, I think it's false.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, what do you say? Okay, let's see.
Yes. It's false. For me, it's false.
Okay, let's see.
Here.
Excellent, it is false. Okay, because the domestic system was used before the Industrial Revolution, The people used to work at home. Then, who would like to volunteer?
Me.
Okay, Mariana, come to the front.
Okay.
Pick a sentence
This
and
one.
you tell me.
Whole families used to work together in the mines. I think it is true.
Let's see. Here. Whole families used to work together in the mines? Yes, that's right. Okay. Another one?
Yes, me.
Okay.
Again. So, iron.
Don't you cheat.
No. Iron is better than steel because it is tougher and harder. No, I think steel is better.
Excellent. Yes, you paid attention indeed. Okay, it's false. Okay, false. Please. Yes, here. Okay. Okay. Let's see. I will choose the one you are going to answer.
Okay.
This one. Can you read?
Yes. Masculine and animal power are also considered a source of power. I think it's true.
Yes, it is true. Excellent.
And the last one.
Okay, yes, you do it. So.
Okay.
No. Okay.
For me, it's true.
It's not fair.
Yes, you're right. Yes, but I told you at first, at the very beginning, that you had some clue here because you know the amount or how many were false. I'm sorry, or true. Okay. Well, up to here, this is all. This is it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to talk about the social life during the period of the Industrial Revolution. Okay? We're going to start with slum houses. During the Industrial Revolution, the town grew very, very quickly, especially those in the north of England. The rich had large and comfortable houses, each with its own garden. And the poor, of course, could only afford cheap houses with no garden or yards, built with cheap materials. The walls between the houses were only 1 brick in thickness, and if a house had a cellar, the tenants of that house would probably sublet it to a poor family. Few houses had running water, and there was one standpipe in the street, and the water was turned on for only about 2 hours a day. Most town water was pumped and treated, and it was, of course, from the nearest river. The poorer parts of the town had no sewers. The only drainage was large and open gutter, usually located in the middle of the street, and it was called a canal. Its name was a canal. Here I have a picture of it. You can see it. Here we have the buildings of the slum, and in the middle of the street we have the canal.
Oh,
yes.
wow, it's in the middle of
It's
the
in the middle of the street, of course. So, and here we have another example of slum houses. Here we can see that it was something overcrowded. Okay, the next topic is the health, which is very relevant. In the early years of the 19th century, most people died before they were 40. The reason of that was the huge amount of diseases. The disease which caused most death was tuberculosis or consumption. This disease was carried from person to person, and it attacks the lungs, and the victims gradually waste away until they die. Another disease was what people called the fever, and it could be 2 different kinds of disease. We have the typhoid, which comes from the germs in drinking water, and the other was the typhus, which is carried by body lice. The symptoms were very, very similar. High temperature, sickness, and the face of the victim would swell and blood vessels burst under the skin, turning it nearly black. Another common disease was smallpox, and it was more common in young children. The faces of the victim could be disfigured by pock, yes. And the most dreaded disease was cholera. It was like the worst disease. Generally, the cholera germs are carried in drinking water. It spread easily, and more than half of the people who caught it died, of course. The patient face turns blue, and he suffers from constant sickness and diarrhea. Now I'm going to talk about the law and order, which is another important topic. And for example, the country was divided into parishes, and a parish being an area which has its own church. The ratepayers meeting in the church vestry ran their own parish in their own way. One of the ratepayers' duties was to police the parish, and they took in turns to be constable for a year at a time. The constable was unpaid, and he still had his farm or business to run. So he was unlikely to do his police work at will. Watchmen's wages were so slow, and that no one any good became a watchman. Partly because there were no proper police, there was a lot of crime in the 18th century, and parishes were too small to have prisons, and each country had a jail. The man who was in charge of that jail had no salary, but made what money he could get from his prisoners, for example, by selling them food and drink. Parliament passed the Metropolitan Police Act, yes, and it is very important. All members of the force were properly paid, and their police work was a full-time job. Okay, it was like another pet shop. So the man who persuaded Parliament to pass the act was the Home Secretary of the time, Sir Robert Peel. For that reason, the new police were nicknamed the Peelers. Yes. Then there were changes in prisons. In charge of John Howard and Elizabeth Fry, because people began to believe that criminals should be reformed and turned into law-abiding citizens. As a result, for example, the government built a number of big prisons, and these new prisons are going to replace the other old country jails. The prisoners were kept with good food and exercise, so in good conditions. However, solitary confinement was too much for many of the convicts in Pentonville, for example, which was very famous. And some went mad and committed suicide. Yes. Now I'm going to talk about the care for the poor. Yes, the people in each parish had to look after their own poor. Some constables collected money from the other ratepayers, and then he used the money to help the unemployed, or paupers as they were called. Yes. They were of two kinds. We have the impotent, such as the old, and the sick and orphan children, and then there were the able-bodied. This was a bad system because the main problem was that few people had much money. Yes, prices rose rapidly, so that many people with jobs couldn't afford enough food. The wages were very low, and they don't have any money to buy bread, for example. This was called the Spinhenland system. Yes. And the overseer would always give them enough money to stay alive, but it was not enough. So what was the point in working in this kind of institutions? Here, for example, I have a picture which shows you, yes, all the women, yes, and their condition of labor here. So, the reason for running workhouses was that everyone could possibly work. Yes, if you asked for help, you were not given money, and instead of that, you were offered a place in the workhouse. Another important topic is education. Yes, rich people send their children to schools with short fees or hired private tutors. Poor children had no education at all. They could not read or write and knew nothing about religion. To solve this problem, Andrew Bell, a clergyman, invented the material system. Yes? Under this system, the teacher chose his older and brighter pupils and as monitors, and he used them to teach the others. Yes, here we have a picture of an example of the model. Yes?
Yes.
So the schools taught only reading, writing, arithmetic, and religion. But there was a lack of teachers. That's the purpose of. In 1846, the government decided to help, and it began paying for the education of young people who wanted to make teaching their teaching career. They were called pupil teachers. In 1870, the Parliament passed an Education Act, and this said that people in any place which do not have enough schools must elect a school board. The school board then had to build schools and pay for them out of the rates. In 1876, the Parliament passed another act which says that everyone must attend school until the age of 13. Okay, now I'm going to talk about child labor. Yes? Children had to work, and most of them helped their parents on the farms or in the workshops. Many parents were poor or greedy, and in the Middle Ages, a man, for example, went to work in a little drift mine, and he took his wife and his children with him. He dug the coal and they carried it to the surface. The work was not only hard and dirty, but it was very dangerous, so Parliament took steps immediately. In 1842, the Parliament passed a Mines Act, which forbade the employment in coal mines of any women or girls, and the boys under the age of 10. Yes? The factory workers, who cared little for the children, organized 10 hours movement. So Parliament said they had to work a shorter day, and they would mean a shorter day for everyone, of course. And in 1833, the Parliament passed a Factories Act to say that no child under the age of 9 must work in a textile mill, and that those up to the age of 13 must do not more than 48 hours a week. They must also attend school for 12 hours a week. Yes? The Education Acts were some help, but child labor ended only when people began to earn reasonable wages. Yes? They no longer has a desperate need for the children's earnings as they did in the 18th century. Yes? So now, I'm sorry girls, but we're going to do an activity.
Oh no!
Is it necessary?
Yes, of course it's necessary.
Okay.
Yes?
Okay.
So, listen. Here we have some concepts. related to the improvements that happened after the Industrial Revolution. Yes? And we are going to classify, so, sorry, let me move the images there. So, we have more space to do it. Yes?
Okay.
We have the main topics of the social life. We have slum houses, health, law and order, care of the poor, education and child labor. Yes? So we are going to classify the concepts in the correct place.
Okay.
It's very easy. I
Okay.
think you can do it.
Of course we
Yes?
can.
Okay, who wants to come to the front?
Mariela.
Okay, Mariela, so sorry. I'm so sorry, but
Okay.
you should participate.
I will choose education
Excellent.
here in education.
Very good. Excellent. You can choose another one.
Another
Yes.
one. Workhouses.
Yes, very good.
I think it is here. Care of the poor.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Please, Mariana,
Your turn.
your turn.
Well, development of vaccines. Okay, it is health.
Yes, it is related to health. Excellent.
And Mines Act.
Yes.
Is it child labor?
Excellent. Very good. Very good. So, Mariela, please.
Another one. Okay.
Another one.
Another.
Improvement of prison conditions. I think it would be here. Law and order.
Very good. Very good.
The creation of the teaching career
Mhm.
here in education.
Excellent. Excellent. Very good.
My turn, right?
Yes, it's your turn.
Solitary confinement. It was related to the jails. Law and order.
Very good.
Okay.
Excellent. Another one?
Monitoring system. Okay, it's education.
Very good.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. And we have another. We have 3 concepts more. Sorry.
Urbanization
Yes.
here in Islam House.
Slum houses. Very good. Excellent.
Creation of the Metropolitan Police
Mm-hmm.
here, law and order.
Excellent. And the last one, Mariana, please.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It's very easy.
Factories Act and child labor.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, girls. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Okay, we hope you have enjoyed our lesson and found it interesting. Goodbye.
Goodbye.